So it's usually the young people who are going to have to pay for what's happening today. So if I was a young person, I'd be thinking, okay, I want a fiscally responsible government. And it hasn't been that way for a while. Things have ballooned.
Well, folks, if the Jays losing to the Dodgers wasn't bad enough last night, we also had the announcement from Donald Trump that he would be increasing the tariffs on Canada by an additional 10% because of that ad from Doug Ford and him not pulling it after the initial backlash that was received when Donald Trump decided to end negotiations with Canada. So we're going to be getting into that with a few other stories. Before we do, like, comment, and subscribe. Would really appreciate it. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the news. Now, for some of you who aren't up to date with the current situation, the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, decided to meddle in the federal government's negotiations with the US by putting out an anti-tariff advertisement on American networks using a speech from Ronald Reagan from 30 some odd years ago, making it sound like Reagan is not for tariffs in a way to inform Americans that the tariffs are actually a bad thing. Now, Donald Trump got wind of this. He wasn't a fan of it and canceled negotiations. But it wasn't until the Reagan Foundation put out a statement saying that this was some sort of fraudulent thing that the Canada did, or Doug Ford in particular, that he went on the attack yesterday and put out this message saying, Canada was caught red-handed putting up a fraudulent advertisement on Ronald Reagan's speech on tariffs. The sole purpose of this fraud was Canada's hope that the United States Supreme Court will come to their rescue on tariffs. Their advertisement was to be taken down immediately, but they let it run last night during World Series, knowing that it was a fraud. Because of their serious misrepresentation of the facts and hostile act, I am increasing the tariffs on Canada by 10% over and above what they are paying now. Thank you for your attention of this matter. And this is where we are currently finding our situation. And you would think you would learn from all the mistakes that Doug Ford has done. However, now some of the other premiers like David Eby and Wab Kinew are also jumping on this bandwagon and saying that they will be doing the same thing sooner rather than later.
Such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer.
This ad by the Ontario government won't be on the air for long. Premier Doug Ford says he's pulling it on Monday after it airs during the World Series games this weekend. U.S. President Donald Trump has said he's terminating trade negotiations with Canada over the ad. But as one ad campaign goes, another appears to be on its way.
But we are going to be doing some targeted ads to ensure that the voice of forestry is represented.
In a post on X on Friday, BC Premier David Eby said Americans need to hear how tariffs raise prices. We are making ads to defend British Columbia and Canada's forestry workers. U.S. tariffs and duties on Canadian softwood rose to 45% over a week ago, a devastating blow to an already struggling industry. This week, the family-owned Sinclair Group Forest Products announced it will be scaling back operations at 3 of its sawmills, affecting about 350 workers.
Talking to forest workers, they want us to fight to make sure that the Americans understand, that Ottawa understands that our industry is important.
A forestry industry consultant says the topic is sensitive and some tactics are not working. According to a political expert, the BC government's move makes sense, but its effectiveness will depend on how the ads will look.
The key thing that BC is going to have to balance is creating an ad that's effective for creating the message that they want, but so much so that it doesn't cause an overreaction from Donald Trump.
A spokesperson with the BC Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation says the ads will be digital, not for TV or radio, and they'll target U.S. audiences most affected by the new tariffs. The ads are expected to roll out in November.
And now you know why Daniel Smith said David Eby's anti-Canada, because these guys are just going to bury us. They are going to put Canada into the dirt with their stupidity and their egos. And Donald Trump actually thought that, I guess, after he announced that the trade negotiations were off, that Doug Ford had pulled the ad. It wasn't until a reporter informed him that Doug Ford was going to continue playing the ad for the next 2 games for this weekend for the World Series, and then he was going to pull it, that triggered Donald Trump to get even more irritated and say this.
Trump said he's going to pull that Reagan tariff ad come this Monday, but it's airing it during his first two World Series games.
Well, you know, it's a crooked ad. I heard he's airing it. Canada, that's why I pulled everything. With Canada, they did a crooked ad. They knew it was Ronald Reagan loved tariffs. What they did is really dishonest. And I heard they were pulling the ad. I didn't know they were putting it on a little bit more. They could have pulled it tonight.
They're going to pull it Monday.
Well, that's dirty playing.
Have you spoken with Carney?
But I can play dirtier than they can, you know?
And that is something that we do not want. We don't want to be punished by Donald Trump solely out of spite, because it's the Canadian people that are suffering the most right now. And as this economist points out, there's going to be permanent job loss. Sectors are going to have to downgrade. And when Donald Trump was asked on Air Force One, what can Canada do to get back to the table? He basically couldn't care less. He said, just leave it kind of status quo. America will be benefiting from it the most. And now there's reports saying that Carney and Trump aren't even expected to meet or talk, which is then going to push Carney closer to China.
Traveling on Air Force One, President Trump was asked what Canada has to do to get trade talks back on track. He didn't hold out any hope.
Really, I don't think there's much they can do. I just assume leave it the way it is. If you leave it the way it is, it's very good for us.
After talking with Prime Minister Carney, Premier Ford said Ontario will pull the ad after this weekend's World Series games. But Trump says the damage is done.
Well, Canada lied. I mean, what they did was terrible. They made up a fake statement by President Reagan. Reagan was a big supporter of tariffs when needed, and we need tariffs for national security.
As it stands, current U.S. tariffs include 35% on most Canadian goods outside the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, as well as 50% on Canadian steel and aluminum, and 35% on softwood lumber. And now, an additional 10% because of what he calls a hostile act by Canada. McMaster University economist Colin Mang says Canada could be in for a tough adjustment if the U.S. tariffs stay.
Canadian auto manufacturers, Canadian steel producers are going to need to redesign their production processes. We're going to need to see a refocus towards the Canadian market. Unfortunately, what it does mean is that job losses are likely to become permanent. The industry will be a bit smaller, but it will adapt and it will serve the Canadian market.
So Carney and Trump were both flying to a summit in Malaysia today. Trump said he has no intention of meeting with Carney there. Carney's office says there is no meeting with Trump planned, but he hopes to have lots of meetings with Southeast Asian leaders about expanded trade.
Now, to me, this is very unfortunate to hear, because just the other day we had the former affair minister for Stephen Harper talking about how Carney could potentially use this opportunity that they're going to be in the same place in Asia to maybe pull him aside for, say, 5-10 minutes, say just, hey, can we have a quick little conversation? But now it's seeming like this is not even going to be on the table because of how irritated he actually is.
You know, circling the wagons here at home and trying to get our premiers once again pulling in the same direction. I think that's important. I mean, rumors are swirling that Premier Eby in BC is now thinking of running a similar type of ad campaign. It looks good. It's great domestic, local politics to, you know, give the appearance that you're standing up to this evil tyrant. But, you know, as we've seen, this has national consequences. Sector by sector fallout is happening now as a result of breaking off the trade agreements and leaving these tariffs in place. And so, you know, I think, frankly, the priority is right here, minding the fences at home and trying to get this trade talk back on track.
What are the chances that Carney and Trump will have a sit down?
Well, a sit down is one thing, and that is usually something that is requested well in advance, just as some of these talks, you know, the communique is already written. But there is the chance, and I've been to many of these foreign meetings, you have the spontaneity to go up and say, look, I would really like 5 minutes of your time. There's a lot at stake for both of our countries. There's nothing prohibiting the Prime Minister from doing that. And so I suspect strongly that he will, or he will attempt to do so, or even have intermediaries set this up.
Now, unfortunately, that last part that Peter MacKay was trying to suggest about maybe an intermediate setting something up might not even work either, because Trump's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, also had a press conference or took some questions and answers on Friday, and he expressed that because of the Trudeau-era government, there's so much frustration dealing with Canada that they find it too difficult at this point.
Yeah, obviously the President Truth, something that reveals his frustration with the actions and postures of the Canadians through months of negotiations, and we'll see how it goes.
Mr. Hassett, on Canada, you said the President was frustrated, but is this just a knee-jerk reaction?
I think the frustration has built up over time. I've been involved in some of these negotiations, and the Canadians have been very difficult to negotiate with. And you look at all the countries around the world that we've made deals with, and the fact that we're now negotiating with Mexico separately reveals that it's not just about one ad, that there's frustration that's built up.
What it has been so challenging about dealing with Canada in trade negotiations?
I guess the lack of flexibility, and also I would guess that leftover behaviors from like the Trudeau folks that can be very frustrating for people who are negotiating.
So not only is the Trudeau era still a stain on the Canadians when dealing with Trump, clearly Carney still has a lot of those people in the cabinet that was from the past. He's gotten rid of some of them, but some of the main players are still also there. But it's gotten so bad that Donald Trump admitted on Air Force One that he's looking forward to meeting with the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, over dealing with Mark Carney. That's how bad it's gotten right now, that he's looking forward to seeing the North Korean leader over even talking to Carney at this point.
In South Korea, do you have any plans to meet with Kim Jong-un at the DMZ?
Well, I would if he would contact him. And I was, the last time I met you, and I put it out over the internet that I'm coming to South Korea. If he'd like to meet, I'm open to it, certainly. We had a very, yeah, I'd do it. I mean, if you want to put out the word, I'm open to it. You know, they don't have a lot of telephone service. They have a lot of nuclear weapons, but not a lot of telephone service. So I'm open to it. I had a great relationship with him, and he probably knows I'm coming, right? But you want to put out the word, I'm open to it.
Do you expect to touch it all before this trip?
Really, there's not a lot of ways other than the internet. You know, they have very little telephonic service, and but he knows I'm coming, and he would, I'd be open to it 100%. I got along very well with Kim Jong-un.
Now that right there is how you know things have gone off the rails, because if he's willing to meet with the North Korean leader and not even have a conversation with Mark Carney, that's how you know you've really screwed up. And I understand Carney was not the one who put out this ad. It was Doug Ford. But as they always say, the buck stops with you. He is the top. He is the prime minister. So the responsibility still falls at his feet. And again, this is what he campaigned on. He kept talking about how Canada needs a new strong leader, how he's the crisis negotiator. We wouldn't have him here if it wasn't in need of a crisis. He kept bashing Pierre Poilievre, saying that he would kneel down to Donald Trump and that he would just take all the money and not even help out the workers, which is the complete opposite of what Carney has been doing thus far.
What Canadians want, they want change, but not just any type of change. They want positive change, new positive leadership that helps us build together. They want leadership that stands up for Canada. Pierre Poilievre is going to take all that money, put it in his pocket, cut taxes for the rich. We're going to protect our workers. We can't change Donald Trump. And a person who worships Donald Trump, like Pierre Poilievre, will kneel down before him, not stand up to him. Someone who believes Canada's broken won't put Canada first.
Now, what I find to be amusing about this comment that Carney just said about Pierre Poilievre kneeling at the feet of Donald Trump is, you know, things are getting so bad when the NDP is actually attacking you in the House of Commons and saying that Carney has basically given up everything to Trump, even getting down on his knees and insinuating that he's pleasured him orally in the Oval Office.
Shocker this morning, Mr. Speaker. President Trump terminated trade talks with Canada. This is a blatant failure on the part of the Prime Minister. He was elected as a champion negotiator, and now he's coming back empty-handed. Despite this, he did everything he could to please Trump. Border security, military spending, opening the Keystone XL pipeline. Stepping back on the taxation of web giants, he practically went down on his knees in the Oval Office. Job losses are spreading. When will the Prime Minister stand up with a real strategy to protect workers?
Wow. I honestly don't know a better way to end the video than that, so I'm just going to stop here. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.